Hello, race fans. Welcome back to the USF Pro TV studio. Our preseason shows underway, continuing as we get closer to spring training at NOLA Motorsports Park, and of course our first rounds at the Grand Prix of St. Petersburg. My name's Rob Howden. Fantastic to be here, and a great guest joining us here today. We're going to go to a driver who has came essentially through the ranks and had the success and made it all the way to the NTT IndyCar Series. Sting Ray Robb from Juncos Hollinger Racing will be joining me here today, and we're going to talk about what he went through, where he entered the program coming out of karting, like so many drivers do, all the pitfalls, maybe some of the hurdles he went through, and the things that he really focused on to make sure he would have the success like we want for all of our drivers in the USF Pro Championships presented by Continental Tire. Let's see if we can bring him in here right now. Stingray Rob, can we get you in here? Let's see if we dial you in. Where is he? There he is. Stingray, how are you?
I'm doing good, Rob. How are you?
I'm fantastic, man. Great to have you here. Again, really, for me, I love it because I've been part of your career for so many years, watching you come through karting as a young kid, and then, of course, getting all the way up into Indy Pro 2000, which was what it was then. Pro Mazda, actually, when you first started, was Pro Mazda, and, of course, all the way through Indy NXT and into IndyCar. Let's first off, how are things for this year? You're pretty excited that you're going to be racing for Juncos Hollinger this year?
It's a little bit of a homecoming, as you know, Rob. Yeah. I spent 3 years with them. I kind of had a little bit of a longer run in the Indy Pro 2000 or USF Pro 2000 stage before I won the championship with them in 2020, and then promoted myself and the team up into Indy NXT with them after winning that scholarship. So it's been kind of a little break away from them, but knowing Ricardo and his championship mindset, I knew it was a good return, good place to come back to, and they have a good program in place. So I'm hopeful for what the year has. IndyCar is a little bit more of a tough playground than some of the other series that we've run in before, so I know our work's going to be cut out for us, but he's got the right mentality, the team's got the right mentality, and I think that we could have some good results if we put everything together.
Well, this is it. I'm going to use you here with this show for all the young kids that are coming up the ranks, some that are with us right now, or others in karting who are looking at coming up. You mentioned the fact that you came in what was Pro Mazda at that time when you first started and spent 4 years at that level. It was a bit of a different approach, and let's talk about that first. You were in karting. You moved into shifter karts, 125cc shifter karts, and then made the move to cars. And instead of starting in USF 2000, you elected to start in what was Pro Mazda and is now our USF Pro 2000. What was the mindset behind that? I know you did some stock car racing. I think you did Skip Barber as well. What was the mindset of coming into that level of the program?
Yeah, I mean, it was a very interesting scenario because, Rob, you know my family very well. Mm-hmm. You know that our history of funding didn't continue on past karting. And so that was kind of a choice that was made for us when we decided to go to Pro Mazda. It was the last year of that Pro Mazda car before they switched to the new Tatis chassis. So it was actually cheaper for us to run with World Speed and that old chassis than to run USF 2000 at the time and the newer Tatis chassis that had been, just developed in that recent year. And so for us, we were looking purely at, okay, what is the most seat time that I can get, the most bang for the buck that we can get? Yeah. Because like you said, I did stock car, I did open wheel, I did Skip Barber, I did karting all the way up through the ranks. And so I had done the soul searching, if you will, deciding what discipline I wanted to stick with. And that was IndyCar racing because it was an American series and it had such a diversity of tracks that we raced on. And so the USF Pro Championship was such a clear path for us to select, but getting our foot in the door was the key. And so that was the cheapest way that we could do it. It was the best way that we knew how at the time. So we stuck our foot in that door and opened it up as far as we could, and it worked out well in the long run.
Well, you leveraged it, right? And it was a bit of a shorter schedule because we didn't have the full season. There wasn't a ton of cars. You got a chance to get a lot of seat time in. And then, of course, the new car came out in 2018. You were on the front end of that with the new car. And then you ended up finding ultimate success. And I always look to you and use that word patience because you kept learning, you kept developing. And we saw that, of course, in 2020 when you were able to be one of the dominant drivers to go on to win the championship. Is that something that you kind of, a mindset you've had as patience? Because it's all about driver development, but making sure you gave yourself enough time to get to where you needed to be?
Yeah, I think it's probably more perseverance than it is patience.
Okay.
You keep knocking on the same doors a lot of times, but for sure, I mean, I think that our intention was to be a front runner at the beginning of that championship, right? But joining the series with a team that wasn't consistently running in that series was difficult, running with World Speed. So they didn't have that recent experience to pull from, especially on the tire compound that we're running then. And so then when the new chassis was introduced in 2018, I think it was, I joined a new team with a new car, new engineers, and so I didn't have that continuity from season to season. So my development was kind of hindered because of that. hindsight being 2020, right? We could go back, we could run the USF 2000 car and that similar chassis to what was introduced in the USF Pro 2000 car later on. Just for the similarities. I mean, the driving styles were a little bit different, but at least the feel was there. I mean, it was the same tire compound, a little bit bigger, a little bit faster, but the characteristics were much more the same. So I think I kind of had to unlearn the past season's car before I could relearn the new Tatis car. And so, again, patience, perseverance, however you want to label it, I had to have whatever that was. And I remember you saying it on one of the broadcasts, and Steve Wittich was another guy that was like, Stingray, when you get that one, the floodgates are going to open. And that's what it was. And so I'd been on the podium. 2018, I finished on the podium at the Indy GP race. I finished on the podium in 2019, qualified on pole a couple of times. So it was like, let me in, I want that win.
I'm right there.
So we kept knocking on that door, and 2020 was a whirlwind of a season, but I just remember like the light switch kind of came on. We got that first win at Mid-Ohio, and it was kind of like that, okay, I can win. I have the skills developed, I have a good team around me, and having that continuity year to year is what really made a big difference, because 2019, I was learning a new team yet again with Juncos Racing. My first year with them. And so we were developing the setups that I needed for my driving style and my preferences, so that when we got to 2020, first lap out on the track, I knew what I was going to feel. It was something that we'd set up for the whole season prior, so that when we arrived, we weren't relearning it, we weren't redeveloping. It was just a very, very similar feeling to what I was wanting and what I was familiar with to have that success.
Well, the interesting thing is, too, we always talk about the fact it's a 2-year program, right? Back in the day, it was 2 years of USF 2000, 2 years of USF Pro 2000. You just did all 4 of those years in one car, but it was a different race car. The Pro Formula Mazda in 2017, like you said, a much different race car than the new one, the PM18, which is now, of course, the 22. But then you moved your way through, and then you said you got that continuity. And again, that kind of speaks to the series we have now, because all our cars are the same, right? So you're able to step out of the juniors car into a 2000 car, and of course, into the Pro 2000 car. Now, you get to the point there, you end up getting your wins, you go to Indy NXT at that point as well, and right out of the gate, you did well, second in the championship the year after before going to IndyCar. Let's just talk a little bit right now, the transition from the Pro car into the Indy NXT car. Was it an easy one for you? Many people talk about the fact that it's a pretty big jump.
It is. And I think that at that time, my experience had been such a lower level prior to stepping into the USF Pro 2000 car. And so that was the fastest car I had driven. So when I stepped into Indy NXT, it wasn't so much the speed that caught me off as much as it was the weight. The car has a longer wheelbase, it's heavier, it's more downforce. And so the minimum speeds that we were feeling were actually fairly similar. That you go into a corner, you carry the speed, you think the Indy NXT car is going to be rolling a lot more speed through the center of a corner, but that wasn't the case. And really the time difference came on the straightaways, or the longer duration, more higher downforce tracks versus the PM18 car, that it really was a very quick, nimble, fast reaction car. And so my transition almost came with slowing down my hands. And it was a similar transition going from go-karts into cars. You see a lot of go-karts, they have the really quick, twitchy, fast hands, because that's what you need. The steering ratio is very quick. You're making very, very small adjustments. The Indy NXT car, I had to be way more intentional with my footwork and drive the car more with my feet than I did with my hands. And when I learned how to do that, it allowed me to kind of develop a driving style around a setup that I needed. And again, I'm talking about driving style. Everyone has it, but the best guys, the best drivers, they know how to just do what they can, right? To get the most out of the car that they're given. And so it took me a while to find that again in the Indy NXT car. But again, like it happened, a 2-year program came into place. At the end of the 2-year program, I finally got that win. And it was like the light switch came on. I was like, oh, man, there it is.
And there they came.
Just waiting on it.
There they came, right? All of a sudden the races come down. I obviously want to leverage you to try to help our young kids that are coming up the ranks or into karting right now as well. One of the you've been in this thing a while. I was going back and look at the results. I'm like, Stingray's been racing cars for 9 years now, I think. You've been behind the wheel. It's wild, isn't it?
That's crazy.
So let's talk about the differences from now back to then. Were you into simulators back then? I know like everybody's in iRacing right now. Every time these kids come to a race, they've been on the sim for days, for hours. Was that something that you were leveraging at all when you moved into cars?
No, by no means. I was a seat time driver, if you will. My dad, he always would be a subscriber to the 10,000 hour rule, right? So we've heard that rule before. It's from the book Outliers. Malcolm Gladwell says you have to spend 10,000 hours doing whatever it is to become great at it. And so I did that in the karting race, and we were trying to do that in the cars, but we know how the business works. We're limited on seat time when it comes to car racing a lot of times as young drivers. And so that 10,000 hours didn't come very quickly. So I think iRacing and these other simulator companies are a great supplement to real seat time, but they cannot be a full replacement.
Agreed.
And so for me, like, I actually really struggled with iRacing stuff because I just didn't see the value in it. Like, and I wish I didn't take it as for granted as I did, because now I do. I think that what it really develops is a range in a driver, because you have so much more at your fingertips. So you don't have to just drive the USF 2000 car, USF Pro 2000 car.
True.
You can drive a sedan. You can drive a NASCAR. You have a lot more opportunity to feel what a car needs, and then learn how to drive it. And that muscle memory can translate to a racetrack. Now, it might not be the 100%, but maybe it's getting you the 80%.
Yep.
You know, getting your foot in that door to get used to a track in 5 laps instead of 10 laps. But really, when you're limited on track time, that's what makes it so important. So hindsight, I wish I did more simulator work. That's something that I'm enjoying more now, especially with our off seasons being so long. I mean, we're 6 months out of the car in IndyCar. So for me, it's something that I at least get to do what I love at home. So in a small sense, it's a good value, but I wasn't back then.
So again, one of the things that you guys have been able to do, which is obvious, you mentioned earlier that you guys didn't have the funding you needed to continue on. You had to try to find the most affordable way to get seat time when you first came in to what was then the Pro Mazda program. You've done a great job with social media. You've done a great job putting investors and partners around you. I think that's one of the key things, the business side of the sport. Was it a surprise to you how important that was going to be to you? I know that your social media, you got it over 100,000 followers at one point on Instagram, which was so huge, right? You can take that to a sponsor. Let's talk a bit about how big of a surprise it was for you, how business and how important it was for you to keep going as a driver.
I mean, it was a surprise, but at the same time, it wasn't. You know, I think that motorsports has always kind of been this way. It's not your typical football, baseball, basketball, whatever else, those athletic sports where it's talent-based come into play. The goal with motorsports is to let it be talent-based, and that's the goal of the USF Pro T Championship. I think I'm speaking for them, but yeah, I do believe that because I got to be a part of that. You know, drivers before me got to be a part of that. When you win a championship, you get that scholarship. It's them believing in the talent of that driver to carry him on into the future. Now, the business side was something that I think was very interesting for me because, you know, I was a high schooler at the time that I joined the USF Pro Championship. Exactly. I was 15 years old. Yeah. So for me, I'm just trying to figure out how to do my business class at school. Like, I don't even know what a tax form looks like, let alone how to fundraise for a $100,000 plus racing series. But like you said, we had great partners, investors come on early. So it takes a community. Like, I can't take any of the credit for that. You know, I think that, Rob, you know my parents' work ethic just as well as anyone. You got to see that firsthand from the karting rinks. My dad would be the one that was driving us to and from races, and they'd run their grocery store in the meantime. And then when we stepped into the cars, they couldn't rely on that income source anymore. So having Peter Rossi as my manager was a big part of that. Creating an investment fund that people got to kind of pour their belief into me through their dollars. That was a big part of it because, yes, the followers on Instagram is important. I think that having a good social media following is important because then you have eyes on you that you may not get otherwise. True. But you can't sell a whole racing series on that. So again, it's a supplement rather than the whole thing. And that's really what the investment came down to. It wasn't people that were trying to get the most bang for their buck, putting their brand on the side of a race car. It was they believed in who I was and what I was doing. And they saw a potential for the future. And so that's what we really sold people on. You know, I was having luncheons with 15, 20 investors once a month for like 3 years. Wow. And we might have gotten one every five luncheons or something like that, right? So there was a lot of time spent in a room talking to these people. But, you know, Anders Krohn was a guy that I spoke to early on in my career. And he said, every door you knock on, it's a no or a yes, right? And so every time you say or you get a no, you're just one step closer to that yes. So keep knocking on doors. So if it's 1 out of 10 and it's that last one, count it a blessing because you got that one, right? So it's tough. I mean, it really is a tough business, and I think that you'd be ignorant to think that you can do it just based off talent. Yep. But I hope that they can. Would you tell young drivers coming in to lean into the business side a lot earlier than maybe you did or some drivers do? A lot of guys, you know, their family money, they have the finances they need to potentially, you know, get started early in USF Juniors, USF 2000. But they hit that window when you start getting into Indy NXT at $1.5 million. Would it be your recommendations get started early on the business side? Absolutely. You're creating relationships for the future. And when you have investors that support you from that early stage, they're going to continue to support you. And I think that I've seen it with several other drivers. Remember, Aaron Telitz was a guy,
Yeah.
right? He was a championship winner in the Pro Mazda car a little bit before me. And I remember he had a company come on board with him. And I'm speaking for him yet again, but he had a company come on board with him at an early stage, and they carried him through. Like, it was either he was going to get that company to support him or he's going to be done. But because of their belief in him, he's had a really good career, winning races, winning championships. So get started as early as possible, develop those relationships, because that's really what it is. You might think, it's strictly business, it's strictly dollars. That's not the case. These are people that we're dealing with day in, day out. So make it personal. Make it your job to have that relationship, because that's going to go a lot further than anything else you can give them.
Man, wise words from a young guy, that is for sure. Stingray, thank you so much. Let's just wrap things up. What are you looking forward to this year? What are some of the goals? You're back with Juncos Racing. I love the fact you've come together. Same thing with Connor Daly, your teammate. He was a Juncos driver as well, as part of was then the road to Indy. So you guys are both coming back to Juncos. It's going to be a great environment. What are you looking forward to? What is something you want to see get done this year in 2025?
I'm really thankful for another year in IndyCar racing. I think every year is a big blessing, and I'm living the dream. I always tell people that this is something that I dreamt about for so long, and now that I've achieved it, I'm like, well, what do I do? Keep driving, keep trying to win races. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to keep striving for some good results. And I think that the thing that I'm most excited for this year is I have kind of a foundation under me. In the past, I've been a second, third year driver in these series, and I feel that way now. I haven't had that light switch moment come on yet. But I can kind of see glimpses of it, right? I can kind of feel that moment coming. And IndyCar racing is very tough, very competitive. So if I can be competitive in that series, I feel pretty confident that I've achieved what I needed to achieve. And, this is something that I feel very lucky that I get to do. So being able to run in the Indy 500 is a huge, huge opportunity for me. Leading laps there this last year was an awesome opportunity. So hopefully we can do that again this year. Maybe on the last lap instead of earlier on.
That's it.
That'd be very cool. But there's definitely some good things to come from the team, from the series. I'm really excited about the opportunities with Fox Sports coming on board as well.
Indeed.
That'll be a good boost to the sport. So there's a lot of things to look forward to. I just want to get back in the race car and hopefully get some good results.
Well, if you follow your career path, the more you run, the better you get, right? And so we're going to see that. We saw it in the USF Pro 2000. We saw it in Indy NXT. Hopefully we'll see it in IndyCar as well. Stingray, thank you so much for joining me, man. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Rob.
Well, folks, there you have it. Another fantastic episode here for our preseason show. Sting Ray Robb from Juncos Hollinger Racing joining us. One of the really success stories of the US Pro Championships. You talked to him and listen to what he talked about in terms of perseverance, not quitting. But the business side is so crucial. Take what you will from this interview, and I would take it all, because obviously Stingray's been a fantastic success story, working his way all the way to the NTT IndyCar Series. Excited what he'll be able to do this year for Juncos Hollinger Racing. In our next show, we're going to have a guy I've known for a long time. James Hinchcliffe is going to join us. Of course, we followed him through his career. He was part of the road to Indy back in the day as well, before it was a USF Pro Championship. We saw him win IndyCar races, of course, become top analyst for NBC and the NTT IndyCar Series broadcast. He's also been doing a lot of Formula One these days as well. Can't wait to have him here with me. We're going to talk about the evolution of racing, and it'll be a fantastic sit-down with a great Canadian. Thanks for tuning in, folks. We do appreciate it. My name's Rob Howden. Bye for now.